Greece isn't just broke, it's close to being broken. An economic depression has pushed society to the extremes, with fascists and anarchists competing for control of the streets, and immigrants fearing for their safety. Hello and welcome to a new series of The Cafe. I'm Mehdi Hassan, and this week we're in Athens, a city reeling from a seemingly never-ending recession. The Greeks invented the word chaos to describe complete confusion and disorder. Crippling debts, rising taxes, and savage spending cuts have pushed the country today to the brink of economic and social collapse. Queues at soup kitchens are lengthening, the number of homeless people is mounting, and the suicide rate has doubled. Greece may be the birthplace of Western democracy, but 2 elections in the space of just 2 months suggests a dysfunctional political system. And it's the IMF and the European Union that seem to be calling all the shots around here. Some say the Greeks brought this on themselves, that they're lazy and feckless and don't pay their taxes. Others blame the country's membership of the euro. So can Greece escape this crisis? Or is it forever cursed with being the economic basket case of Europe? Let's find out inside the cafe. Joining us in the cafe are NIKITAS KANAKIS, the Greece director of the charity Doctors of the World. He used to focus most of his attention on refugees, but now has to also deal with the humanitarian crisis affecting ordinary Greek families. Eva Kaili was the youngest member of parliament for PASOK, the Greek Socialist Party, which ruled Greece for most of the past 4 decades. PASOK is now the junior partner in the current coalition government. Kostas Lapavitsas is a Greek economist and a professor at the University of London. He's the author of the new book, Crisis in the Eurozone, and believes Greece must leave the euro if it's to survive. YANOS GRAMATIDIS is president of the American-Greek Chamber of Commerce, representing the biggest businesses in the country. He supports both austerity measures and structural reforms to the economy. KONSTANTINA PILIOURA is a postgraduate law student at the University of Athens. She's part of a new generation of Greeks who are looking for work, but living in a country where youth unemployment stands at more than 50%. And ZANNI is the Deputy International Secretary of New Democracy, the biggest party in government. She's adamant that Greece should stay in the euro and comply with its international commitments. Thank you all for joining me here in the cafe in Athens. I want to kick off with you, Yanos. You're a businessman, you know what's going on in the economy out there. How bad is it? How bad a state is the Greek economy in?
The real economy is actually in a very bad shape. We have thousands of small and medium-sized businesses locked down and impossible to operate under this situation because there's a lack of liquidity everywhere, and because of the austerity measures suffered primarily by the population, you don't have consumers anymore. So we really need to boost consumption so that we boost the economy again. At the same time, the state itself, the public economics, are in a very bad situation. We have an enormous debt, and at the same time we have a very significant deficit, which means that we are spending more than we produce.
Kostas, you're an economist. Give me some numbers. How bad is the Greek economy?
I think the Greek economy has entered the depression. A serious...
Not just a recession, it is a depression.
Not a recession. It's no longer a recession. This is a depression. The figures are comparable to the Great Depression of the 1930s in the United States and elsewhere. Unemployment, for instance, is already almost 23%. Youth unemployment is well over 50%, and it's bound to rise in the coming period. You add it up, this is warlike conditions.
Warlike conditions?
Warlike conditions. I know it's hard to believe when the sun is out and when you're in this place in Athens, but do believe me, Greece, the Greek economy is dying on its feet. These are depression conditions. And it's easy to confirm even further if you look at investment, which has been contracting for 5 years on the go, consumption, which has also begun to contract very seriously. People are pulling back, they're not spending like they used to. Exports have reached a ceiling and they're not expanding anymore. And now public spending will also be further reduced this year, so things are bound to get worse.
It's only going to get worse. Things aren't getting better.
Basically, Greece is withering away. That's basically what's happening. It's dying on its feet, and it will continue to do so as long as these policies continue to be followed.
May, you're with the New Democracy, the ruling party. Who is to blame for all this? How did Greece get into this condition where the economy is withering away?
It's not a recent phenomenon. What's driven us here is, I would say, 30 years of the wrong model being used. And that's why I'm thinking there's no quick fix solution here. What we need to do is restructure everything, really.
So it's a domestic problem, because when I talk to Greek people, there seems to be a divide. There's some people who say, this is our fault. We got here through our model, through overspending, through borrowing, through not paying taxes. There's others who say, no, it's the fault of the euro, the European Union, the Germans. Where do you sit in that debate?
It's very easy to just point the finger elsewhere and say it's not us, it's the foreigners or the euro, but that's not true. I don't believe we'd be in a better shape if we weren't in the euro or if we weren't helped. I mean, we are being helped right now by the EU and the IMF and all that. We just have to look back and see what went wrong and see what we can do right now, where we stand.
Eva, you were in Parliament in the PASOK party when PASOK was in government, when this crisis intensified. Do you share May's view that it's too easy to blame foreigners and Europeans?
Well, I saw part of this view, but I do believe that we could have handled the crisis better. So it's a matter of Greek politics in the last 30 years, yes, indeed, but also the European Union didn't manage to find the right recipe to get us out of this crisis, out of this mess. And as you see now, it's not a Greek problem, it's a problem of Spain, Italy, a banking problem that's all over the world. So I think that the combination of these two problems created such a huge crisis that's almost now a depression in Greece. So I think that we need to find a solution altogether. And it's not that we ask from the EU to give us something or to lend us money without paying back. We just need some time to fix our economy. But we also need time for the whole European Union to be more stabilize and to be able to get our markets off the recession. So it's not just a Greek problem. It could cause a domino effect, all the decisions made for Greece.
NIKITAS, tell me, as someone who's a member of the middle class job, a dentist, what's your situation been like over the past few years?
It's getting worse year by year. Actually, the most of the people in the middle class have lost more than 25% to 30% of their income. In the case of dentists, they have lost even about 50% of their income.
That applies to you then, you
exactly,
personally.
Yeah. And the worst is that it is not a very clear future. But even if, beside the people of the middle class, that still they can face the problem, the very poor people that we see in our organization, the humanitarian organization, they suffer. And the first thing we need to do is stabilize the bottom level. If the people cannot survive with dignity, then we cannot make reformation, we cannot change things, and we cannot have a future.
Kostas, I want to come back to you. You're someone who thinks, am I right in saying, that the fault can be placed elsewhere from Greece? That it's not the fault of the Greek model or the Greek economy per se for the crisis as we find it now, it's the fault of the euro or the eurozone? Or
I'd be the last person to say that the Greek economy and Greek society doesn't need root and branch reform and change. I'd be the last person to say that. Many things are wrong in Greece, and incidentally, the people who are saying that they're going to change everything in Greece today are precisely the people who brought us to this pass. It's very important to say that. Suddenly, belatedly, they've realized that things are wrong in Greece. Where have they been all these years? However, it's very important to start from the general. And the general is that this is a Eurozone crisis. This isn't a Greek crisis. This is a crisis that essentially you find in Portugal, in Spain, in Ireland, increasingly in Italy, and elsewhere. It's a problem of the structures of the Eurozone. It's a problem of the monetary union and how this has panned out. And let me put it to you differently. The structural weaknesses of the Greek economy were here 15 years ago too. Greece wasn't bankrupt and wasn't about to become bankrupt, and it didn't have a 25% contraction of GDP at that time. Things were wrong, It was an
it
unequal
wasn't
society.
like it is now.
But it wasn't dying in the street.
Let me ask Yanos, when you hear Kostas make that point, that you talked about a broken Greek model, but that model existed 15 years ago, you weren't bankrupt. So how can you blame the model rather than, say, the euro, as Kostas does?
Well, I have a slightly different impression. I believe that the international crisis, the world crisis 3 years ago, unfolded the problems of the Greek economy and made them obvious. And that's why we had that explosive exhibition of the Greek problem. The country for many years was not competitive. And that's why we see that we don't see many foreign investments, direct investments in Greece, because we are not competitive. We don't have a tax system which is stable and fair. We don't have institutions to fight corruption, and we have to do something about it sooner or later because we are accused that we have corruption in this country. Yes, we have corruption, but we have to fight corruption somehow, and we have to import best practices from this.
We'll come back to corruption in a moment. I just want to bring in Konstantina. You're not an economist or a politician, you're a student. Tell me this, what do you and your student friends, where do you place the blame? Do you think it's a Greek problem, or as Kostas says, it's a problem of the Eurozone, for which Greece is being unfairly scapegoated?
To my opinion, it's both. So, but we have to slightly distinguish the two. It's the Eurozone problem that affects us, and it's the Greek problem that has some inherent weaknesses, let's say. In Greece, the politicians didn't do what they had to do best, that was to give the right example. So I think that they gave them the right to do all those things that now the global community blames Greece for.
Kostas, can the Eurozone problem be solved by Greece pulling out of the euro? What's being called Grexit?
No, I don't think so. I think this is wishful thinking. I mean, perhaps I could explain. The Eurozone is a monetary union. Monetary unions are very hard things, very rigid things, particularly a monetary union such as the one in Europe. When a weak economy chooses to join it, it chooses to follow certain rules, which it might or might not be able to follow, depending on its own internal structures. Quite clearly, the whole of the periphery of the Eurozone has not been able to abide by the rules, Greece being perhaps the worst case.
But would Greece be a better place?
Oh, yeah. I think pulling out of the Eurozone, in my book, is the first step to Greece putting its house in order. I think it's the first step to reversing the policy of austerity, to give the economy a breath of fresh air.
No, I disagree on that. Even if we exit the Eurozone, it would be the same thing. They would create the same problems. They have to change their mindset and they have to change the policies. And the problem is not being in the Eurozone. Eurozone creates, if you want, security net for us, for Greece. So I do believe that this is a minority saying that Greece will be better leaving the euro. This is something that would take us decades back. And I do think that our problems can be solved. We've already started doing that. We have cut our spendings, quality of life over like 50%. So exiting now the euro would just make it easy for people that want to make money out of Greece, for the banks, from people that are waiting to buy land or to make investments more cheap. So we would lose our value, everything in Greece.
And
so
what you're saying is the majority view, I believe. Most Greeks don't want to pull out of the euro.
It's like the 80% of the majority. I talk to people all the time from all the parties. Even if they voted against the government, they wouldn't vote for Greece to leave the Eurozone.
Kostas, you're in a minority, is what
Of course, but I'm used to it. But the thing that's not being realized in this country is that it isn't a matter of choice. This is what's happening.
You're saying it's inevitable regardless of...
I'm saying that this is the direction of events. You know, when I and a few others said 2.5 years ago the problem is the euro, people thought that we were lunatics, madmen. Now everybody accepts that the euro is a problem, and everybody realizes that the position in Greece...
Who accepts that the euro is a problem?
The whole of the Eurozone accepts that, and everybody realizes that Greece in the euro is a problem. That's why you have this...
Let me ask you...
They all
very briefly,
say
Kostas,
that we should stay in the Eurozone.
Let me just come back to the
Nobody
Greeks, though.
said
Let me just come back
that,
to the Greeks. Now, 80%, according to the polls, 80% of the Greeks are in favor of staying in the euro. Actually, if you finesse the question, it comes out different now. If you ask people, are you prepared to make any sacrifices to stay in the euro, it's actually much less than 80%. But let me put it to you differently. Even if 180% of the Greeks said we want to stay in the euro, it would make very little difference.
Well, let me bring in May on that point. New Democracy is signed up to the bailout, signed up to the euro. But what if it's not about whether you want to do something or not? What if it's out of your hands? Is it inevitable
I don't
that
believe
Greece is
that.
heading out of
No,
the
no,
Eurozone?
no, no, I don't believe in
Bookies are
anything
placing their
being-
bets right now.
Well, they do their business and we do ours. I don't believe. We're masters of our destiny. We change, we do what's needed. We,
Are you
follow...
really masters of your destiny when you have a troika that kind of tells you how to set your economic policies, what cuts to make, when, where? Are you really masters of your destiny? You really believe that?
I think it's easy to say, oh, we've lost, our sense of self over this. And quite a few people take advantage of the presence of the Troika whenever they're in Athens.
This is the European Union, the European Central Bank, and the
Exactly.
International Monetary Fund. Sure.
Exactly. And I'm just saying, let's not look for scapegoats. Let's reason out what needs to be done. And I don't think leaving the Eurozone will help. If nothing, it will add to our problems and will be, I don't know, it will take us years and years.
Well, let me ask Yanos here. Leaving the euro is not what the majority of Greeks want. It's not what most political parties
It's a
want.
nightmare scenario, actually.
Not even Syriza, the anti-austerity opposition body, wants to leave the eurozone. Greek business, I'm assuming, doesn't want to leave the eurozone.
Absolutely not.
So what do you do? So what do you do about the fact that austerity, the preferred solution to this problem, doesn't seem to be working?
Well,
you keep doing the same thing again and again, and the Greek economy keeps contracting again and again.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, we can't go on like this. Austerity, the way it was imposed upon the Greek people, it was the wrong decision. Because instead of the government going to reduce public spending, they went to the most obvious aspects, being the pensioners and being the workers and the private employees. It was wrong. This is what created the austerity.
Let me ask the two representatives of two parties that are in government. Is this government, the current Greek government, going to lay off as many public sector workers as some people like Yanos would like to see laid off? Is that really going to happen?
Well, I don't know if it's going to happen, but we have early retirements from a lot of people, so the public sector is shrinking quite, seriously, in a serious way, and we need 3 or 4 years to make it. I think we'll get there. So I don't think that's the main problem.
And we
the problem was
should also
to create
talk about the social
growth.
dimension of this. We already have over 1 million unemployed.
So we just add to the unemployment. We wouldn't solve anything.
What I'm saying is that there are other ways of doing it. Of course, people are going to be laid off, but you can't just take a brush and say that's it.
Let's say it's not a dilemma. It's not austerity versus euro. So it's not you have to decide if you want to leave the eurozone, so it's no more austerity. That's a dilemma that's fake. The thing is that we have to create growth. We need some time to do so, to do all the reforms, and we can do it in a better way if we stay inside the eurozone, because our whole economy is based in a different way than Argentina, for example, is working, is producing. It's a whole different economy.
Argentina, which defaulted on its debt about 10 years
Of course.
Let me just bring in Nikitas. There are some people like myself, live abroad, we look at Greece. The stereotype is the reason the Greek economy is in a bad shape is because Greek people don't pay their taxes. Is that fair? The tax avoidance
It's not everyone avoid taxes. If we forget that the poor people who have today an income of less than 500 euros, they have to pay more taxes or they have to have more cuts, it won't be a future.
Kostas, do you think there's the political will? You talked about people who caused the problems in the first place. Do you think there's the political will in Greece to tackle this problem of tax avoidance? Especially by the rich who help fund the system?
Not really. There are changes being made because of intervention by the IMF and from the outside, but I don't think the problem is drastically confronted or dealt with. But if I could just make a point about austerity. Austerity is not a choice of the Greek government. Austerity is the official policy of the European Union and of the European Monetary Union. It's been applied across the board, and it's been applied with particular ferocity in Greece. As long as Greece continues to abide by the rules of the Monetary Union, it will continue to have austerity. As for staying within the euro, the other issue that we didn't mention is, of course, debt. Greece has got an enormous public debt, which it simply cannot tackle. The debt is unpayable, unviable. Greece will have to default, and it will have to default very seriously on its debt. Its debt has become official. It will be very hard to default on this debt and remain within the Monetary Union. And the third point is growth. There is a growth strategy that's been followed in Greece. It's a growth strategy of sorts, which is liberalization and privatization. It's the same old ideas of the IMF and so on. There's nothing new in this. This has been about for 30 years. It doesn't produce growth, and it will not produce growth in Greece. What Greece can look forward to is continued contraction for several years, and after that, stagnation as far as the eye can see. This is the reality, and as long as it remains within the monetary union, that's what's going to happen. There's not going to be any growth in this country.
Konstantina, do you believe politicians when they make promises or pledges right now? How much confidence is there in the Greek political system right now?
I don't think there's much confidence because they haven't proven that they can follow their promises up until now. There are many people my age that didn't even go to vote, and this means something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe because most of the citizens want to listen that will promise everything to everyone, and that's how it worked until recently.
Well, you were in Parliament, and you were very
Yes.
critical of your own party, PASOK, that's
Yes.
been ruling Greece for a large period of time over the last 30 years. What's changed? Why should people now believe that this new democracy PASOK government
But
is different to previous
I do
governments?
believe that we're not trying to be likable to people in Greece.
Not about
now.
likeable, but people having confidence, trust.
I know, but you know, if people trust promises that don't involve a whole reform in the Greek economy, and they're just promising everything to everyone.
Yeah.
No more pensions cutting, no more salaries.
They say no pain without, no gain
so
without pain.
You can say that. If you say that, then you mislead people and you create expectations that you can't handle. So we have to be serious. We don't have to be likable. We have to be useful. We have to learn from our mistakes. So that's what I'm saying. And I do believe that in Greece we have to try and learn from our mistakes, and we have to show that we didn't only have incapable politicians in Greece. The whole Eurozone couldn't handle the crisis. They gave us the wrong medicine. It's not working. They don't want to make a step back. Merkel insists on austerity. I do agree that the austerity
The German
measures
Chancellor.
are, yes, everybody thinks that this will lead us into growth. It can't lead us into growth. We have to find a different plan.
Well, let me ask May. This is the birthplace of democracy in the West, Athens, Greece.
So it is.
And yet here's a country which has had 2 elections in the space of a few weeks, didn't produce a majority government, has now produced a coalition government. You have a troika, you have international foreign institutions coming in, basically saying what you can and can't do if you want to carry on getting money. Has democracy become an overrated concept in Greece?
No, not at all.
Do
It just-
elections still matter?
Elections do matter. Yes, we did have, I think, 40% that did not vote in the past elections, which I find disappointing considering how critical things are, especially the youth, which basically it's their future. People no longer trust politicians, and that's understandable given the circumstances. They've heard a lot of promises, but then we need to have not just results-oriented politicians. We also have to have the kind of voters who ask the real questions.
But if you talk to those people who are suffering and you say, we will do X, Y, or Z, why should they believe you when they think, well, actually, Angela Merkel's going to make that decision, or the IMF is going to make that decision, Christine Lagarde, the head of it. Why should they believe that Greek politicians have the power to use your phrase, to be masters of their own destiny? What's the evidence?
Well, we are accountable to people. They're not going to go and knock on the German Chancellor's door and say, hey, you said that and you did that. I mean, I understand there's a clear lack of leadership in Europe, and that's part of the reason that we are here right now. And people do not trust Brussels or whoever else is in charge equally as much as they distrust Greek politicians. But that does not mean that we should end up in a democracy of the blameless, where everyone and anyone is at fault.
Evie, do you resent
I
the
do
way
believe-
foreigners view Greece?
I
There's
do
a
believe-
view of Greece as kind of, forgive me, lazy, feckless, not working long hours,
No,
not
Greeks
paying
work
taxes.
like 2 or 3 jobs each, and they work really hard. They didn't have a good tax system, but I do think that we have to change the way people see Greece. And it's a matter of young politicians now and new politics that should take place in Greece.
Well, we're going to come back in part 2 and talk about the human impact of the financial crisis in Greece and the rise of far-right parties here in the country. Join us in part 2. Welcome back to part 2 of the cafe here in Athens. Nikitas, in part 1 we were talking about austerity, about spending cuts, about what the government is doing to try and balance the books. What does that translate into in places where you work, on the street with real people? What's the human impact of spending cuts in Greece?
Most of the people who see us, they know Medicine du Monde from their action in Africa, in Latin America, in cases of
That's where your
emergency.
NGOs largely work.
Now we have some clinics in Greece that we see people here. This year we have seen more than 40,000 people who come for free treatment and free medicines. And the number of Greeks who come in these refugee clinics, these were refugee clinics the previous year, there were 5 times more.
5 times more.
5 times more. There are even people who coming to ask for food items. We have seen that the most of them, they have a family income less than 300 euro per month. Let me give you two examples to understand. Kostas, for example, who is unemployed now. He used to work in a private company. Now he doesn't have a job for 2 years, and he's diabetic, 50 years old. He doesn't have any insurance. This means that he has to go around to find the medicines he needs. Let me give you another example. 70 years old with a small income of less than 500 euros. She has to pay for her medicines. She has to pay for the special tax in the electricity.
She's a 70-year-old pensioner.
And then she has nothing to survive. What we will expect from that woman, 70 years old, to go to find a new job? We have to punish her because the country needs to change. And let's give you a third example of a young mother who is very, very poor because her husband doesn't have a job, and she does the crime to have a child. And the state hospital asks her more than 500 euro to deliver, otherwise they will keep the certificate of the baby.
They'll keep the birth certificate if she doesn't pay 500 euros.
So what I try to tell is that when you are in a country in a humanitarian crisis, and I keep insisting because I have seen humanitarian crises around the world, that this is a humanitarian crisis.
Is it an exaggeration, Nikitas, to say Greece is being reduced to the status of a developing country?
Possibly people who see us from Africa, they will think what they are telling of, they are in a nice place, with nice jackets, what they are talking of. But we have to keep in mind that when we talk about humanitarian crisis, we talk about people who don't have to eat, people who doesn't have medicines, people who cannot see a doctor, people who are homeless. And we see in the last 2 years more and more numbers to come up. We don't compare ourselves with African countries, with all the respect to these countries. We compare with the rest of the European countries, and we see that we don't have any safety network at all. And if we don't make such a safety network, no one will care to help for the development of this country.
Kostas.
But that's exactly the point. We've got a situation of a middle-income country with all the usual accoutrements of that, being reduced to the state of a developing country. That's exactly what's happening. And I know that the World Bank has offered its good services to Greece, right? The organization that specializes in helping developing countries par excellence, this is now an organization that said, we can help you. So Greece is very rapidly being reduced to the state of a developing country with all the attendant problems that they've been so well...
Do people here
specified.
recognise that? Is this something that's publicly acknowledged, or is it something you don't talk about?
It is. We see it in the news every day. Most of us have noticed around the areas we live, the number of homeless people has gone up. I think it's 20,000 right now in Athens, which is huge because, you know, in Greece, society and family are still quite tight. You're not going to let a relative out in the street. That's not happening. But we hear the stories and we witness them every day.
We're also developing in a different way. We're a developing country, but in a different sector because our policies didn't work out. So we have to change our fields of economic growth. We have to go back to tourism, to agriculture. We have to change our priorities. So this could be seen in a good and optimistic way if you have politicians and politics that can program our future for the next 10 years or 20 to have a more stabilized tax system that can bring investments in Greece, because I know a lot of people that would like to invest in Greece and they're scared of the tax system. They don't want to invest. They don't know what's going to happen. This is a problem that, Lagarde and Merkel and Cameron, when saying all these things about Greece, they're not helping. They're just creating more problems.
Back in April, a 77-year-old pensioner caught the news headlines, Dimitris Christoulis. He said he shot himself in the main square outside the Parliament building, saying, "I can't see myself fishing through garbage cans for sustenance."
Every day we have a case
of suicides.
Yes.
And
Suicides.
we have a lot of
Greece was a country which had one of the lowest suicide
Exactly.
rates, I believe.
But what happened here in Greece? People who have a background, a psychological problems background, now they find it no support from the family. It's nothing to protect them, no one to care.
And they don't hope for anything.
Exactly. And all this creates a new atmosphere for a lot of people to try to do it.
Yanos, in part one we were talking about austerity, you were talking about the need to downsize the state, redundancies, make the public sector smaller. Isn't that just going to increase the desperation, the poverty, the number of suicides, if you go down that road?
Well, I believe that the rest of 2012 and next year, 2013, are going to be very difficult years for the country. But let's be optimistic in the sense.
I say
even more.
People dying.
Yes, even more. But the situations in the economy cannot change from the one day to the other. Now we have a new coalition government. Which has to have some space to breathe. We have to give them at least 100 days to present their programs to us. And also how they can exploit the foreign aid, because we need technical aid. We need the Troika's aid. And even if we were not obliged to have a Troika, we should have invented a Troika in order to assist us by bringing best practices in the country. We are walking on a very thin line, where we have to care about rebuilding social justice on the one hand, and on the other hand, by getting back the country to its normal track. But we have to give a chance to this government, because that's
Exactly.
the best timing, and there is an opportunity to do it today.
And to have Greeks united and not divided in a
Exactly.
coalition government, which is something very rare in Greece to happen. So we have our national team, our best ones to handle this crisis, and we also have to try to convince European Union. We have to become a union, not only an economic one, not only a political one, but a European Union about the people.
Yes,
because you're shaking your head when Yanos was speaking there.
Sometimes I think people live in a different country, and Greece is in the middle of a huge recession, which is going to become deeper. This is the reality, right? From now to the next 6 months, there's not going to be any miracles. The room for maneuver of this government is next to nothing, zero. This is the reality of it. They will have to impose new cuts. I don't know where they're going to find them, how they're going to make them. Even if they implemented them, it is debatable whether these cuts will actually bring in the results that they're hoping that will come about.
So that's why we need some time to apply all the reforms.
Yeah, there isn't going to be any
Because the
time.
austerity measures is not working.
There isn't going to be any time. The most that there's going to be is possibly an extension of another year, and that's because
2 or 3, that's what they're talking
Possibly.
about. Hollande is talking about that, Lagarde is talking about
And
that.
it's not only an issue of extension of the time, but
possibly.
we
But
need also...
here we're talking whether you're going to be beaten with the whip or with the stick. That's the difference.
Those are the choices. Is what you're saying.
This is the choice.
Well, another dilemma I don't agree on.
So basically, the policies of austerity will continue. They're going to get deeper. The country will find it increasingly difficult to meet the targets for paying the next installment of the loan at every period. By December this year, I expect the situation to be once again critical. The reality is that exit will be forced from the outside, or the country will
Exit
be
from the
teetering
euro.
the euro, will be teetering on the brink. That's the reality. Now, I just do not see how growth will come. From where? What will be the sources of growth?
It will take time.
It will take so much time that the country will have died before it
It's
happens.
a country with huge advantages. We have a lot of things we could invest on. It's not only the land and the tourism.
Investment has been declining for 5 years non-stop.
You are absolutely
I agree,
right, but for the reasons
we need a couple of years
but for the reasons
to
that we
make a
have
new
just
plan.
explained.
It's
I
not
mean,
something
Let me
that
ask
can't
Konstantina.
happen.
You're a young person, you're a student, 50% youth unemployment or more.
I
Are
can
someone-
assure
do think-
you that everybody talks about it. All of my friends, there's.
Are they looking for jobs? Are they finding
yes,
work?
Yes, they're all looking for jobs, and I can assure you that they send pretty much like 10 to 15 CVs every day, and they don't get any answer. Or even if they do, they get rejected.
But you know what's the price
And-
now? The salary
Well,
for hours these days.
It's about
250 euros.
200 euros for a young trainee lawyer, or maybe no salary at all.
So what are you
And
and your friends thinking about doing? Those who can afford, are they trying to leave the country?
Yes, all the people that do have some money to spend, they do go abroad because they feel that there's going to be a better future for them there.
Here's
The
where
idea is
I'm
here in Greece.
confused.
And I wanted to add
sorry.
something. You were talking about suicides before, and I want to say that the rise of suicides also shows that it's not just people with psychological problems or the lowest class people that have a problem. It's also the middle class that is suppressed by this situation.
Here's
So-
where I'm confused. Yanis, you're saying, you sound optimistic. You're saying, let the reforms happen. Coalition government, 100 days. You're saying, rich country, investments possible. He's saying, humanitarian crisis. She's saying, people are leaving the country. Is there a disconnect here?
No, we had.
You're not in two different
to face-
worlds here.
No, but it was a shocking way of handling the crisis. We didn't know how to handle it. European Union didn't know how to handle it. So we're facing quite different things here in a different level. It's the political thing, the economic one, the society.
You are right on this, but we need to put in the political agenda the humanitarian situation of the country.
Absolutely.
Because we have to understand that what happened in this country, we have to put it back in the agenda and to see what we will do for these simple people.
Cost us 50% youth unemployment, you mentioned earlier, more than 50%. In countries where it's that high for that long, it only leads in one direction, social unrest, riots, extremism. Is that where Greece is headed?
Well, Greece has had low-level social unrest for two and a half years. So it's not.
Is it going to get worse? If the
It is
situation-
quite likely. It is quite likely that as the situation becomes worse, we're going to see serious unrest, anomic behavior. Yeah, it is quite likely. But if I could just make a point on growth, because it's very, very important, I think. The structural reforms that are being proposed for this country are in the usual mode, liberalization and privatization. They've been tried time and time again in developing countries. They've never worked, but they've been tried in this country. Let me give it the benefit of the doubt.
It's not only this. There are other things too.
That is
For instance, to
fundamentally.
change the social security system, to introduce flexible labor in the market. You are talking about structural reforms everywhere.
Liberalization and privatization
Okay, that's fine.
are blanket sort of envelope terms for this kind of thing. Let me give it the benefit of the doubt. Let us assume that they would work. Let's for the sake of argument. I don't think they will, but let's for the sake of argument assume that they would work. In the best possible scenario, it would take 10 years for it to work. In the best possible scenario. Because that's how it works. Now, and everybody acknowledges that. Not only this, but usually these measures are best implemented when there is also growth in the economy. These measures are not supposed to be a counterweight to austerity, which is how it's presented in this country. This is basically confusion and bad economics. Okay. Austerity is compressing everything, but we will liberalize and suddenly we will offset austerity. That's not how it works.
You're saying 10 years best case scenario. May, in that 10 years, what if extremist parties like Golden Dawn, which the world was horrified to see, won 7% of the vote, went from, I think, 20,000 votes in 2009 to nearly 500,000 votes a few weeks ago. How worried are you as someone who's in a mainstream centre-right party who looks over and sees a far-right party on your heels?
Well, I think it's a way of protesting, really. People feel that the state cannot provide adequate protection. There are entire areas in Athens where the police stands by, really, and lets these groups of thugs
Is it
take
true
over.
that the police voted for Golden Dawn? Some say that half of the police force...
Disappointingly enough, it looks like quite a high percentage did go for Golden Dawn as a protest because the police are underpaid, understaffed, and they are asked to go out there and risk their lives for what is quite often a very double standard way of being treated by the public. They want to be protected, but they blame the police as well.
I believe it's deeper than protest, than just protest. I'm afraid that it's deeper, that people move. Because when
their
when
ideas
you are
are being
poor,
attractive.
when you are poor, the easier way is to blame the other poor.
Well, there's
I
a
have
lot of
theory,
blaming of
actually.
immigrants going on right now.
Exactly.
That's
It's
the most
illegal
poor, the
immigrants.
vulnerable.
It's not protesting only. We have so many illegal immigrants. It costs us like 10 billion each year to handle the illegal immigrants that come to Greece, and we lack the borders of the EU.
And not
So
just
this
that,
is
we
something
have
that costs us.
areas
So you don't
of
think
Athens
immigrants,
that are
immigrants are being
money.
scapegoated for the financial crisis? They're not
No,
being
no,
blamed.
it's a huge amount of money that
It is
we're
a genuine
spending there.
problem
Of
that needs
course
to be
it
dealt
is.
with.
It's a whole problem that we're stopping it from getting inside the Eurozone, like the borders of the
But isn't the
Eurozone
danger that
saying again.
parties, mainstream parties like yours and May's party,
We
have
didn't-
dealt with it so badly
Exactly. I
that the
agree.
far right have been
Yes.
able to exploit
Absolutely.
it?
Yes, but here my theory is that it was a vote of protest and it was at the same time a message to the political system that they have to change. I don't believe that these people voting, having voted for the Golden Dawn, they actually believe in the principles or whatever in the campaign and the manifesto of the Golden Dawn.
You don't think there's a
It
big
is only a reaction
anti-foreigner
of the
hostility
no,
right now?
No,
I hope
believe.
so, but I'm not so optimistic. I think
You
we
think
have
some of
the
those
same
views about
situation.
foreigners and immigrants-
I see this every day, and we see people who even come in our practices,
Yeah.
who talk about this and say you have to throw out these black people, these bloody Asians, because there are foreigners. They're responsible. The people blame the other. And also our politicians use the
If it's a
immigrants as the
legitimate
Jews of
problem
the
that
day.
costs money, you're saying it's wider than that.
I don't know.
I think that the people now try to make enemies. around.
It's
There are the Jews of the day.
insecurity and
It's
illegal
not-
immigrants.
Let me
If
tell
you ask
something. In
people
my
around
place,
the voters, they don't know
I'm
what
from
what
South
Golden
Greece.
Dawn stands for.
I'm from South Greece. That is a place pretty secure. We don't have even immigrants in my village, and Golden Dawn have 20%. Why?
Security, insecurity.
Security of what? There are not any immigrants. Even in Athens,
Were you
that
in-
is a
It's
problem.
not that they believe what they didn't even know if you ask them what Golden Dawn stands for.
Ava, were you embarrassed when you saw the results and they had won 21 MPs and 7% of the vote?
I could understand it. I could understand it. I know it's something that's a transitional phase. It can
You
explain
hope
it.
it's a transitional phase.
I hope, but you know, we know Greeks. We don't change. They didn't become suddenly voters for Golden Dawn.
But
from
two
one day to the other.
elections,
It's
two
a
elections, they
shocking-
take
it's a
the
shocking
same percentage. Don't
it's a
forget it.
shocking
For two elections,
transitional
they
phase.
for two
They
elections
didn't
they
even
vote
have a
again.
program known to Greek people, so it's not something that's really solid. They voted for Golden Dawn. Tomorrow they could vote for something
Kostas,
else.
Greece hasn't had an immigration policy, a coherent immigration policy ever. The policy was not to have a policy, and then it followed the so-called Dublin II agreement by the EU, which basically turns Greece into a reception area, a kind of prison for immigrants,
Yes.
right? So Greece has fallen into this trap. It's the Greek politicians who are to blame for this, who accepted this, but the people in working class and impoverished areas are feeling the pressure. Right?
And the populism of the leftists, of course.
So it is a real problem in the sense that there's a huge number of immigrants relative to the population. These are people who are not very well cared for. The pressure is enormous. And fascism has taken advantage of this in the context of the crisis. But I wish to make a stronger point about the state, though, in this. Because there's talk about reducing the state and turning it into a more efficient and lean and mean machine, you know, from what it used to be. Actually, I'm afraid that's not how it's going to be. And the vote of the police for Golden Dawn is a first sign of this. As the state becomes weaker, as it loses capacities, as it loses institutions and so on, the state will become more disorganized, more corrupt, and what we're going to see is parastatal outfits, often associated with Golden Dawn and similar organizations, who are going to be offering state-like...
You don't think it's a transitional thing?
I don't think it's a transitional at all. The longer we continue down this path, the more problematic will be the phenomenon we're going to witness as far as the state is concerned.
We talked about immigrants being targeted, scapegoated, tackled. What's the view of a country like Germany? We hear a lot about Greek resentment of the Germans. Is that fair? Is Germany right now being blamed for the problems
Well,
of
it's
Greece?
not German people, it's Merkel, for example.
It's Angela Merkel.
Yes, it's the policies of Merkel that created the whole problem in Eurozone. It's not only Greece.
I'm afraid it's the easy way for our politicians, and I don't blame you particularly, generally speaking. You look for an enemy. Who is responsible? The Germans.
No, when they insist so much on the austerity measures, which is not working
Someone
out.
votes for these austerity measures in the parliament. Someone in the
problem-
parliament votes for the salaries
exactly,
to go
but
down.
The Golden Dawn
it's not the Germans.
That's what explains the Golden Dawn. So
I hope to be this because if you go back in Germany, for example, in the 30s, that they were in such a crisis, the Nazist Party started from 5% and you have been where they have been. I'm not very optimistic for one simple reason. They vote for protest the first time. But after 1 month and after a lot of things that have happened in the streets,
Not a lot of things.
They vote again the same people. When you vote twice, this means something deeper than just protest. And this is, I'm afraid.
I think.
I'm
For the entire
very afraid
political
because
system,
I'm not
it's received.
sure what is the message about.
May? You think it's just a message?
No, I think it's not just a message. It's the fact that they are disappointed by what the main parties have to offer. They feel the state has failed on every level in their everyday life, and they've decided they've had enough. Hence, they're going to vote for the most outrageous and extreme party there is out there.
And we should not blame the others. We should blame ourselves for
Well,
our own
well,
faults.
let me
This is the only
put
way
something
get
to you.
out.
Let me put something to you. One of the most famous financial journalists, Michael Lewis, wrote a piece for Vanity Fair, very controversial in 2010, after visiting Greece. He said it's a society that has endured something like a total moral collapse. Is that fair?
No.
No?
No, it's not fair. They will blame us for everything now, you know. It's not Greeks that changed. It's the whole way that the economy is working now. And of course, we have a kind of new democracy now. We have internet, so information is out there. Everybody can find out what's going on. The scandals, the corruption, they can vote in a different way. They can vote with anger. They have to find hope. Things are changing in the world, and we have to adjust. In Greece, it's happening in the most shocking way, because we didn't have the politicians capable enough to stop and negotiate and present a different plan.
But we don't have a lot of time. we have a shortage of time. And if the people continue to be hungry, then we will have a social collapse and a social tension. I'm very afraid about the winter. So any reformation should be very quick.
6 months, 1 year.
Well,
Yes.
yes.
Let me ask you this. We keep talking about time. Let me ask you this as a final question. Where do you see Greece heading? What will Greece look like 2, 3, 4 years from now? Kostas.
I would be amazed
We know what
if
Kostas
Greece is in the monetary union in 2 or 3 years from now.
example.
I'd be amazed. I think the situation will become critical pretty soon. I think this government is very unstable. I think it has every chance of falling before a year is out, and then there'll be a major crisis as far as Greece and the Eurozone is concerned.
May, Greece in 3, 4, 5 years' time, what will it look like?
Well, we are in last chance saloon right now, but I don't think we've flatlined yet, and I'm optimistic that we can pull through and remain in the Eurozone if we do get the help we need from our partners. If Europe remembers there's such a thing called solidarity out there. And as for moral collapse, I would say I'd see a new morality coming out of this crisis. Society pulling together communities. I've seen that around my neighborhood, my old school, helping each other really. Back to basics.
Janos?
I believe that we will overcome the crisis within the next 5 years, not earlier than that. And we have to take advantage in the meantime. We have to take advantage of the situation in Europe, where we should actually support whatever discussion is made for a joint economic governance of Europe, which is extremely important for our country too. And I believe that wherever there is a crisis, there is an opportunity. I'm very optimistic that we will be doing the right thing at the end.
Konstantina, you're a student, you're the future.
Yeah, I think I'm very optimistic. I think that this crisis is a chance for us to look at our mistakes and try to fix them. And Greeks do know how to strive, and I think that Greece will make it in some sort of time from now on.
I do believe that we're going to make it. We don't have another option. Greeks want to stay in the Eurozone, and Greeks want to make it. And they don't want to be in the Eurozone like the black sheep of the Eurozone. So I do think we're getting there. And we made huge steps in 2 years. We've changed like almost everything, the way we think, our mentality. So just wait some time, give us some time.
NIKITAS.
I'm trying to be optimistic. I have to be. But I'm very afraid that we will face more difficulties, and I will see pictures that I have seen in Latin America. What I'm afraid that even if we recover in 3-4 years, we will have a society deeply divided, with less opportunities for the poor, with a lot of differences, and with less social mobility. Because the people who look to us, they have to remember Greece is not the difference, it's not the black sheep. It's the beginning of a Europe less social.
Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for joining me here in the cafe in Athens.
Thank you.
This debate will continue online, and next week you can join me in Istanbul for another cafe.